before you tell us how you can assist them, why has there been such hesitation to discuss what they believe in, or why do you think there's been?
Well, principally because of the way that how can I put it, the more conservative facets of Western political thought here in the United States have certainly demonized Islam as a whole. And by demonizing Islam, they've allowed ISIS to become the figurehead and spokesman for what they have, this caricature that they have formed of the Muslim world. And by having their own media outlets, by having the ability to propagate this information on not just a national scale, on a political scale, but an international scale, they have essentially allowed ISIS to speak, ISIS and Al-Qaeda's ideology, to be branded as Islam. And that is wholly and completely wrong. And when you look at it, we are fighting and have been fighting since well before 9/11 in the defense of Islam, in the defense of the Muslim world, against people who have deviated and have created these cults and are fighting for the elimination not just of the Western world, but of Islam itself.
And
so,
and so how do we so what do we need to do at this instance? I mean, assuming that we can in some way tame the impulse, or is it not taming necessarily the impulse of the right in this country and some on the nominal left to demonize Islam as a whole? But what is it? How do we take that step to fight the ideology?
Right. Well, for the most part, setting our own politics aside, because we do have freedom of speech, we, at a political level, need to understand that we have to empower the Muslim world to develop its own counter-narrative, which is very simple. They have to return to traditional Islam or understand that the Muslim world itself has mechanisms to destroy them, and that's their own jihad. Now, I'm not calling for a jihad, but what I am saying is that the Muslim world has to be given the resources, whether you're going to go out and help them, form better forms of propaganda. We do these leaflet drops in Iraq and Syria that are just laughable. We drop millions of leaflets that somebody in Fort Bragg has developed that, shows ISIS putting men in a meat grinder. And ISIS loves these propaganda drops.
Because it scares people.
The thing that would actually terrify a member of their group, or the people who are giving them logistics support, who are selling the meat on a day-to-day basis, is the fact that they need to understand that it's not their lives that are at stake and that they're fighting for their lives. No, they want to give up their lives. It's their soul that is at stake. And the only people who can clearly present that message are the religious bodies of the Muslim world and the people of the Muslim world, who must we have to help them create a campaign to tell them that they must return to Islam, traditional Islam, right? And that, the head of the Saudi ulema, called ISIS the number one enemy of Islam. He referred to them as that in 2014. And no one in the Western media has said a word about this, They need to understand that continuing in this insurgency, this cultish insurgency, it's their soul that is at risk. So don't drop leaflets of guys, being ground up in the meat grinder. I mean, that's just a joke. But if they were to have the proper quotes from the Quran put into context with an explainer that you are never getting to heaven, God is going to judge you harshly. You need to return to Islam and understand that the traditions of tolerance and respect are what you're fighting against. Then you'll create an ideological revolution within the organization itself. Some of them are going to be, unreconcilable. They will have to be destroyed kinetically. But the guy who is selling them water does not want to go to hell.
So if I hear you correctly, if I gave you a budget, I don't know, you give me the number, but you have that budget, you would make sure that the comments coming from the Islamic world that indicate that ISIS is not true Islam would get more prominence maybe you'd start a PR firm and you would try and place interviews with this guy. But you do leaflets. You just change the nature. Is that it, or what else would you do?
It has to be a campaign. We literally have to work to communicate to the Muslim world that what they are doing, not to the Muslim world, for the Muslim world, that on every asset, not a single line of communications, at the State Department, a single Twitter feed. You have to have thousands of Twitter feeds in Arabic. State Department created its equal in the United Arab Emirates, the Sawab Center, and they have another organization, Hidayah Center. Okay, now there's 2 Twitter feeds in Arabic against ISIS's thousands of Twitter feeds. You have to also go at them via media. There should be an international campaign, which the Saudis are rich enough to run this by themselves, to where they have to vilify this group and call for their return to Islam. When you do that, you establish a clear wall between the 2 ideologies. It's funny because the Saudis have been doing these terror media within their nation for the last 15 years against Al-Qaeda, and it's very effective. But ISIS members, they don't care what their family thinks. They don't care what their country thinks. They will fight to the death. But the people who are supporting them, the people who are buying their antiquities, who are selling them ammunition, okay, they need to understand there's only 2 ways out of this: death or a return to the fold of the community. And their cult ideology has to be explained that the Mahdi is not going to return and the Prophet Jesus are not going to return if you are executing people by the thousands and enslaving people by the tens of thousands.
It's crazy because I think a lot of people just assume, like, there's got to be more than one Twitter feed. It's going, it seems a fairly that seems to be sort of the low-hanging fruit, right? I guess it's just, it's.
Yeah.
I mean,
one would have expected. It's very low-hanging fruit. And Tapestry, my think tank, we're actually a virtual think tank. We actually call ourselves a do tank because we take action. We do, go into their, dark web internet sites and leave propaganda bombs and things like that. But, mainly it's an experimental mode. And we've been, in communication with parts of the U.S. government. And they're just deathly afraid to touch Islam, to even discuss it. And to the point where they won't even use our Arab allies to do this. But our Arab allies are waiting for us.
Because domestically, it is they are boxed in.
Well, then that means that I said this to a staffer of Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker, and I went in and I had this whole discussion. I said, look, I'm bringing 35 years of hardcore intelligence operations experience here. You guys need to go back to what you did to the communists, right? You need to go back and spell out an alternative version of who they are. Otherwise, they will characterize themselves in the Muslim world for you. And when I said, we have to help the Muslim world speak out, and he said, well, now you're talking about discussing the validity of their Islam, so pretty much this conversation is over. Wow. And I said, you have just told me you've surrendered Islam to ISIS. And he was flummoxed. We have to take this on, and we can facilitate our allies and not do the speaking ourselves, but we can certainly become the megaphone for them.
That's amazing. On how, basically the story is we are so boxed in by the venom on the right, or just the anti-Islam, the Islamophobia. I mean, I would imagine, the idea is, well, I guess, then there's a whole nother conversation as to whether domestically, maybe as Donald Trump flames out, maybe there is, some way of talking about this distinction rationally. But
let me make one statement about that. Islamophobia is ISIS's greatest weapon system.
Because it chills the ability to make a distinction between what they're doing and what Islam is.
Yeah, well, you validated everything that ISIS says about the West, that Al-Qaeda has been saying about the West, that bin Laden wrote entire books on about the West, and you prove to those people who are on the fence, as the Onion cartoon, the Onion comment was that Muslim on the fence about terrorism kicked off by Trump.
Yeah.
As an intelligence practitioner, okay, we need every asset of our allies. And we need to understand that we are losing U.S. soldiers, service, airmen, Marines, young men and women, intelligence professionals in the defense of traditional Islam. And the comments against that, which alienate our allies, assist our enemy in the killing U.S. service member and intelligence staff and diplomatic staff. And it needs to be, that line needs to be drawn, and we need to distinguish between traditional Islam and the terrorist cult variation. And if we don't, we just facilitate, whoever speaks Islamophobia facilitates the death of our own service people.
Malcolm Nance. Hi, I'm Sam Seder, and this is an Ann Coulter doll.
You should not be immigrating here. Yeah. Stay in your country and hate us.
For smart progressive talk and a little bit of this and even a little bit of that.
Mission accomplished.
Subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like us on Facebook to get some of our best video clips.